I've always had a soft spot in my heart for A6000 series cameras because the Sony A6000 was my first Sony mirrorless camera, and I've traveled many different places with it. I've taken many photos with it. Looking back now, though, it wasn't exactly a camera that was praised by many reviewers. Objectively, it was a camera with many flaws. A lot of the advanced photographers didn't like the small body, and the autofocus was a bit unpredictable time to time, and the lens selection was pretty terrible back then. But for the price, it was really a great camera for travel and casual shooting. And it wasn't my first camera, but it was the camera that really made me fall in love with photography again and eventually start this channel. And fast forward almost a decade, now we have this, the A6700. Now, obviously, this isn't a direct replacement of the A6000. This is technically a replacement of the A6600, which came out about 4 years ago. So what has Sony done in that time? Well, we're going to find out today. But first, I'd like to thank B&H for lending me this A6700 to make this review possible. So after watching this video, if you think this is the right camera for you, please make sure to check out their product link in the description. If you make a purchase through the link, you're not only supporting a great business, but I also get a small commission from the sales, which helps me continue to make contents like this for you for free. So let's start with the hardware. On the surface, this looks very similar to the predecessor, the A6600, but if you look a little closer, they've changed almost everything. It's gotten a bit chunkier overall, and we finally have a front dial just under the shutter button. With all the previous A6000 series cameras, you had to change all your settings with just your thumb, and the whole front of the grip was wasted. But now having that additional dial will be extremely helpful for more advanced users. Like we saw on cameras like the A7C and the ZVE1, they moved the memory card slot to the side from the battery compartment for a slightly easier access, because with some tripods or gimbals, the battery compartment door will be blocked. So with this design, you won't have to take your camera off every time you want to swap out the SD card. It's still a single slot, but at least it's finally UHS 2 now. And now we also have the fully articulating screen, and the A6600 had the screen that would only flip up and down vertically, which some people loved and some people didn't, but I guess that's like with pretty much any screen design. And I guess the good thing now is that the screen won't be blocked by the microphone on the hot shoe, and it will be much easier to use with gimbals and stuff like that. And we did get a tiny bump in the resolution from about 920,000 dots to just over 1 million dots. And the viewfinder resolution has stayed the same at 2.36 million dots, but Sony claims that it is 2 times brighter than the A6600's viewfinder and now has 1.07x magnification instead of 0.7x on the A6600. One other minor change is the stills and video switch, and instead of just having the movie mode on the mode dial, they added the shooting mode switch as we've seen on some of their more recent cameras, and I prefer this design so much more than the one on the A7 IV. On the A7 IV, the notches were so close to each other and there was very little feedback when you flipped to the other mode, so you would always kind of get stuck in between sometimes. But this feels a lot better and you can clearly feel and hear the clicks when you move between the notches. And the movie record button is now at the top instead of on the side here. Again, if you're a video shooter, great. If you're not, maybe not so much. But at least I think this is the direction that Sony is moving towards on all of their cameras now, so the layouts will be more consistent throughout their product lineup in the near future. In my A6600 review, I mentioned how busy the back of the camera looked with all the buttons and labels. That's still the case on the A6700, but it looks a little better. And I was trying to figure out why that was the case, and I realized we lost one of the custom buttons. And instead of the AF/MF switch and the auto exposure lock button, we now just have the AF on button. This seems a little random to me, like after all these years, but it's there if you need it. Some other things that I wish they changed but didn't. After almost a decade of asking for dual card slots on their crop sensor cameras, we still don't have it. And obviously, having two card slots is not a requirement to any cameras, but it's also never a bad thing to have, especially in this price range. Some people say that they've never experienced any memory card failures, but I've never been in a major car accident where I needed my seatbelt, but I still wear it every day. And yet again, when some of the ports are being used, you cannot rotate the screen. And there's still no pop-up flash, and they took out the flash on the A6600, and I was hoping they would bring it back for this, but that didn't happen. I normally don't care much about onboard flashes on most cameras, but I really like the design of the A6000's flash because you can tilt it back and forth so you can bounce it up the ceilings instead of just having to always point it directly at the subject. And at this point, this just seems unnecessarily intentional. We're back on these jiggly strap clips. I mean, it's been more than 3 years since Sony fixed these on the A7S III, and I don't know if they just wanted to intentionally make this feel cheaper and worse than the A7 cameras, but why would they use these when they already have the solution for it? But obviously I'm just nitpicking here. And the good news is they did not raise the price from the A6600's original launch price, which is $1,400. That's actually huge if you think about it, because it feels like all the new cameras that's been coming out in the recent years, they all cost like at least 20 or 30% more than the cameras that they replace. Like the Fuji XS20, for example, costs about $300 more than the XS10. And the Sony A7 IV and the Canon R6 Mark II, they both cost about $500 more than their predecessors. And when you consider what's changed on the inside, the value becomes even greater. We have the new 26 megapixel sensor from the FX30, so it's not really new, but it's the first time we're seeing this on a more still focused camera. And to be completely honest, talking about image quality on modern cameras is kind of meaningless nowadays because all the sensors on the market are just so good. And even the older sensor that was in the A6600 was still really good. And when I reviewed that camera, it was still much better than some of the newer sensors that Canon was making at the time. The native ISO goes up to 32,000, and you can get reasonably clean images up to at least 6400 or 12,800. And 26 megapixels is still plenty of resolution for a crop sensor camera. So unless you're planning to move up to full frame, for a crop sensor, the low light performance and the dynamic range are, just about as good as you can get. But my favorite thing about this new sensor is actually the readout speed, which was probably my least favorite thing about the old sensor. The A6600 had some of the worst, if not the worst, rolling shutter that I've ever experienced on any cameras while shooting 4K. And this new sensor on the A6700, however, although not quite perfect, not quite on the A7S III's level, it looks like it's massively improved. And needless to say, the video specs have also gotten a massive upgrade. Now you can shoot 6K oversampled 4K up to 60 frames per second in 422 10-bit internally or externally, and in SNQ mode up to 4K 120 with 38% crop. And this being a new camera, it also gets Sony's latest video features that some of their higher end models didn't get, such as active mode stabilization, focus breathing compensation, and auto framing. But the best thing about the A6700 for both photos and videos is probably the autofocus. This uses the same AI processing unit that we first saw on the A7R5, and you'll notice the overall subject recognition and tracking have been massively improved. I was particularly impressed when it was able to successfully detect and recognize the bees in this rosemary bush. I mean, based on my experience, the subject tracking and recognition were pretty good on the A6600, but if you're upgrading from an older camera like the A6000, the 6300, 6400, or the 6500, you'll definitely notice a huge difference. And this being a Sony camera, we cannot not talk about overheating. Long story short, I haven't experienced any overheating while shooting 4K 24 and 30. With the camera temperature warning set to high, it basically kept going until the battery died, which was around 2 hours. But while shooting 4K 60, it does seem to overheat just about 30 minutes or 35 or sometimes 40 minutes or so. So it's not like completely heat proof, but still pretty impressive for such a small camera. So at the end of the day, without a doubt, this is the best A6000 series camera that Sony has ever made. And pretty much my only complaint is that this is still not the A7000 series camera or some of the more pro crop sensor body that some people have speculated. I obviously still like the design and the overall layout, but I was also kind of hoping after all these years, maybe we'll get the actual crop sensor pro body that we've all been asking for. And I was hoping they would make a slightly bigger body like the Canon R7 or the Fuji X-T5. And just a slightly bigger body would have given us room for another card slot, a joystick, and maybe a bigger viewfinder and a flash and etc. And they wouldn't need to take out any existing buttons just to fit a back focus button. But obviously, there's really no point complaining about a camera that doesn't even exist. I don't know if Sony is ever planning on making a camera like that, but the point is, this is still an A6700, and that's what this is. This is still a small and light, portable mirrorless camera, and if you've been shooting with your A6000, 6100, 6300, I think this is finally the new A6000 camera that's actually worth upgrading to for either photos and videos. And honestly, this will set you up for another 5 to 10 years unless you decide to move up to full frame. So that's going to be it for me today. Thank you for watching. And if you have any more questions about the A6700, just leave a comment down below and I'll try to get to them all. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.